This is Fire and Fate by Serena Valentino, Chapter 5, from the Book of the Fairy Tales, The Many Kingdoms. It had been a fortnight since Hades sent the odd sisters back to the Many Kingdoms, and in that time Zeus's son Hercules was born. Hades didn't even know why he had bothered to go to the ridiculous and exceedingly tedious brat celebration. He was met with nothing but sideways glances from his estranged wife and awkward silences from the rest of the Olympians. This event was a spectacle for the ages. The Olympians were dressed in their usual finery, shining gold, and fawning over that stupid brute of a baby. Hades knew he was going to grow up to be just like Zeus. Everyone had gone silent when Hades arrived, and didn't even bother to hide their disappointment that he was there, except for Zeus, who pretended all was well between them. His fakery was insulting, condescending, and belittling. Zeus made a big show of Hades' arrival and piled on the feigned platitudes, not to mention offhand insults and, naturally, jokes at Hades' expense. Everyone laughed, of course, not that Zeus was particularly funny, but his Olympian sycophantic fools laughed at all of his jokes, even if they were always too on the nose. It was exhausting dealing with his brother. Hades wished he hadn't accepted the invitation and wanted to leave the moment he got there. He didn't have the desire or energy to partake in false pretenses anymore. He was done pretending and trying to hide his bitterness. Things had not been good between Hades and Zeus since the day they stood in the ruins of the 10-year war and divvied up the kingdoms. Hades didn't know why he was even trying. Zeus and the other gods had been treating him like a monster from the moment he took his throne, and now he had become that monster. So, after a few quippy remarks, a major dose of snark, and jokes that were far funnier than his brother's, Hades decided he'd better make a quick exit. He was done. No more dinner invitations, no more trying to make amends, no more visits to Olympus until he could take the throne. As he made his way to leave through the gates of Olympus, Zeus followed him for a private chat, brother to brother. We'll get to that conversation in good time, but when Hades returned to the underworld that day, fending off the dead as he floated in his boat down the river Styx, he knew what he had to do. He had a plan to destroy Zeus. A different trio of witches was waiting for him when he returned to his fortress in the underworld, those know-it-all fates. They assured him he would be successful, his plan would work, and they were certain he would overthrow Zeus. At least, they were almost sure. There's always a hitch when it came to the know-it-alls. Hades couldn't abide the Fates' company, but he was encouraged by their foretelling nevertheless, even if it meant suffering their long-winded ramblings and dreadful poetry. In 18 years precisely, the planets will align ever so nicely. The time to act will be at hand. Unleash the Titans, your monstrous band. Then the once proud Zeus will finally fall, and you, Hades, will rule all. A word of caution to this tale, should Hercules fight, you will fail. Okay, sure. It only took him 10 years to defeat, and imprison the Titans, but he could unleash them if it meant overthrowing Zeus's stupid baby and the rest of the Olympians. But how to get Hercules out of the way? That might be a bit trickier. Since his stupid baby was stronger than one of Zeus's lightning bolts, if only there was a way to turn Hercules into a squealing, helpless human newborn, and therefore much easier to kill. Or at least easier for his minions to kill. Hades saw no reason to sully his hands with the trifling brat, so he created an elixir that would turn Hercules human, stripping away all his powers so Pain and Panic could kill him. Easy peasy. But it wasn't enough. Hades needed this to work. He needed a guarantee that he would be able to defeat his brother. He needed more help. Powerful magical help, and he was going to find it in the Many Kingdoms. First stop, the Odd Sisters. It was time to call in his favor. After telling Pain and Panic it was up to them to hold down the fortress for a few hours, that was all the time he originally intended to stay, but you know how it is with witches. Things always take more time than you expect. He stepped into his massive fireplace, caused the flames within to erupt, and within seconds he found himself in the Many Kingdoms, standing in front of the Odd Sisters' home. It was a crooked little house with stained glass windows and a witch's cap roof that sat at the top of a cliff. It was surrounded by a rose garden, and in the back there was a lone apple tree that felt as if it held a special meaning. Around the garden was a white picket fence with a bell at the gate to alert those within if someone was coming. He saw a tortoiseshell cat sitting in one of the windows and looking at him with large yellow eyes. Something about her seemed familiar, but she jumped out of sight when the bell on the gate rang. When he knocked on the door, he was surprised by who answered. It was a beguiling blonde he knew from his own lands, the goddess Circe. She was the daughter of a Titan and a great sorceress known for her ability to transform her enemies and those who offended her into animals. He certainly didn't expect to find a goddess in the many kingdoms and at the Odd Sister's house of all places. "Circe, what are you doing here?" he asked, but before he knew it, she had grabbed him by his robes, pulled him into the house, and snapped all the curtains closed with a wave of her hand. "What are you doing here, Hades? Did the Fates send you?" She looked panicked. "In a way they did, but they didn't tell me you were here. I'm here on my own business. I repeat, why are you here?" "Many years ago, the Odd Sisters' wish found its way into my heart. They prayed for a little witch sister, and I granted their wish. I bound myself to them in blood, and we are now kin. I am them, and they are me. We are one," said Circe, eyeing Hades. He knew she didn't trust him, just like most of the other gods and goddesses. "You're not really known for granting wishes. What's the catch? What do they owe you?" asked Hades, scanning the room. "There's no catch, Hades. They're my family now. They don't owe me anything. And just because I'm not known for granting wishes doesn't mean I can't. We're gods. We can do whatever we want." "Whatever. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. So, do you know who you really are then? Or do they know who you really are? Or do they think they conjured a little sister from the ether?" asked Hades, looking around for the cat he had spied in the window and wondering where the Odd Sisters were. He was only half listening to Circe. He knew there had to be more to her relationship with the Odd Sisters. Circe was renowned for powerful magic and vengeful ways. Then it clicked. She liked them because they reminded her of herself. "They think I am truly their sister, and so I am. I looked into their hearts, Hades, and what I saw there hurt me to my very core. I wanted to help them. So we are sisters now, in spirit and in blood, and as far as they know, this is how it's always been," said Circe. "These witches were far more powerful and interesting than even I gave them credit for," he said, feeling pleased with himself that he had thought to bind the Odd Sisters with their promise to him. If the goddess Circe found these witches worthy enough to become their true sister, then they were truly remarkable, far greater than he had guessed. They had the blood of a goddess running through their veins. They would be very useful indeed. "I won't let you hurt them, Hades, or allow you to bring them into your schemes, even if it may be fated," she said with a great sigh. She walked over to the kitchen table and picked up a book. It was a great tome bound in leather with gold letters that read, "The Book of Fairy Tales." "I haven't figured out how this book works. It's clearly written by the Odd Sisters, or at least by their magic. But there are stories here that date to back before they were born, stories written by their mothers and grandmothers, I believe. But those stories are sometimes hard to find. I'll sometimes see glimpses of them, never to find them again," said Circe, looking at the clock sitting on the fireplace mantel. Hades didn't understand what this had to do with him. He didn't need to be getting caught up in whatever Circe had going on with the Odd Sisters. Yes, these witches amused him, but he was here to collect on their deal, not learn their history. "Look, Blondie, I don't have time for this. What does any of this have to do with me?" "It has everything to do with you. That's what I'm saying. Your fate is connected to the fate of these witches and to mine, and we need to figure out how. Because I don't have time to talk about this right now. I'm meant to be in the fairylands," she said, conjuring herself into a young girl with blonde hair. "The dark fairy Maleficent is taking her fairy exams today, and the Odd Sisters and I will be in attendance." "And why the disguise? Is that how you appear to the Odd Sisters?" "No. It's because the fairy godmother won't object to my being part of the exam if she thinks I'm a little girl," she said, making her way to the door, clearly eager to leave. I know I'm going to regret asking this, but who is Maleficent, and why in blazes would she have to take a fairy exam if she's already a fairy?" Circe sighed. "She's taking her exams to become a wish-granting fairy, and she could use our support. The other fairies don't like her because she's different from them. Again, I don't have time to explain. It's all in the book. Read it, and we'll talk when I get back," she said, but before she took her leave, she turned around, and even though she was in the shape of a little girl, all golden, cherubic, and filled with light, she had the most serious look on her face. If he were anyone other than the Lord of Darkness, he might have been intimidated. "I will not let you hurt my sisters, Hades, and I will do everything in my power to protect them. Everything," she said. Then she walked out the door. Hades rolled his eyes. Was he doomed to forever be surrounded by witches who offered nothing but endless threats and prophecies? First the Fates, and now the great witch goddess Circe, one of the most powerful sorceresses in the pantheon? Something had to be done about her. He needed to think. Maybe there was something in reading this book of fairy tales. Maybe the answer to how the Odd Sisters could help seize power from Zeus was in those pages. So he decided to make himself a cup of tea, sit down at the Odd Sisters' kitchen table near the large round window, and read this book. The many kingdoms were more interesting than Hades had expected. While he read, it became clear the Odd Sisters had a fondness for and felt protective toward women who were wronged in some way. And even if their methods were often misguided, Hades saw a pattern emerging from the pages. The Odd Sisters were trying to help these women. As he read more of the book of fairy tales, he started to fall in love with this land, its stories, its creatures, and most of all, its witches. He saw similarities between this realm and his own. The Cyclopean giants and tree lords were like the titans from his world. The Odd Sisters were like the Fates, or perhaps even the Furies, and the fairies, when he thought about it, were like his family on Olympus, snooty and superior, always passing judgment and getting angry and uncomfortable with anyone who wasn't like them. And the longer he sat in the Odd Sisters' kitchen, the more at home he felt in the many kingdoms. He sat there for hours reading all the stories from the past and the future, some of them heartbreaking and that were inspiring. He loved the sketches of the different kingdoms and their varied architecture. He loved researching the family trees and reading about all the inhabitants in the many kingdoms and their stories, which reminded him of the sagas from his own world. It didn't hurt him as deeply anymore that his family didn't make him welcome on Olympus, and most importantly, he no longer felt lonely. And then something came over him, a feeling he did not expect. He felt more like himself than he had in many years. He felt the inklings of who he was before he came to rule the underworld. The more he read, the more he grew to like these witches. Their stories delighted Hades to no end, and they broke his heart. He was sure, as Circe suspected, that some of the stories were being kept from the Odd Sisters, so he read their stories voraciously. Stories about the Odd Sisters' lives and their past that they didn't even know about, looking for ways in which they could help him. He suddenly realized how mortals could fall in love with their favorite characters in the books they read, how they felt they knew them, and how they came alive in their imaginations. But he was reading about real people, real witches, and he couldn't wait until they returned. The more he learned about the Odd Sisters, the closer he felt to them. They had a connection, shared similar histories, and it was clear they shared a fate. He started to daydream about living in the many kingdoms and popping over to visit the Odd Sisters anytime he pleased, and decided in that moment he needed a place of his own in this land. He needed a place to stay while he figured out how he was going to overthrow his brother, and he probably should be nearby to make sure the Odd Sisters didn't find a way to betray him in some way, which he gleaned from the book of fairy tales they had a habit of doing every time they helped someone. Yes, this was the perfect way to get what he wanted. He didn't need to think of that horrible conversation he had with Zeus before he left for the many kingdoms, the one that led him to ask the Odd Sisters for their help. He didn't want to think of the odious fates and their warnings about Hercules, or his empty throne in the underworld. He had found a place where he felt at home, and he would stay there until he figured out how the Odd Sisters could help him with his goals. So right there on the spot, he dreamed it into being, a foreboding castle, which he named the Forbidden Mountain. It would be a place to relax and get away from the pressure of being the ruler of the underworld. The castle would be perched on a remote and craggy cliff, and covered in glowing green moss, with stone ravens and gargoyles. And in the deepest bowels of the castle, the flames of his realm would burn before a great throne made of stone, a throne he would surely rather sit upon, with the whole of the many kingdoms to explore. He would surely rarely sit upon, with the whole world of many kingdoms to explore. The flames would be a direct portal between the underworld and the many kingdoms, so pain and panic could come get him should anything go amiss while he was away. Yes, this was the perfect plan, he thought. It was a castle fit for the king of all evil, a keeper of the dead, but the fact was he wasn't feeling particularly evil now, and he preferred the idea of spending time with the living. You can't hide from your fate forever, Hades. It was the Fates, decrepit and foreboding. They looked out of place in the Odd Sisters' kitchen. with the daylight pouring in through the stained glass windows. Before he met the Odd Sisters, he had thought most oracle witches were like these haggish creatures. He hated the reminder that he wasn't of this world. What do you three know-it-alls want? The question is, what do you want, Hades? I thought you knew everything. Besides, I already told you I wanted to throne my brother and take over Olympus, said Hades, his head now burning red with anger. And you want to stay here? Said the Fates, narrowing their eyes at him. He knew they weren't wrong. He did want to stay. Yet your presence in the many kingdoms will cause a chain of events that will bring destruction to both our worlds and this one. Did you know that when they were babes, your Odd Sisters were spirited away from the Deadwoods for fear of their formidable power, fear of the destruction their madness could cause? And through that act, they have been set on that very path of ruin and madness. I think I may have read something about that in this book, he said dismissively and continued. But what has that to do with me? It sounds like the odd sisters in these lands are doomed, with or without me. I'm here to collect a favor, simple as that. Then why did you build yourself a castle? There is no accepting fates, Hades, not for the odd sisters, and not for you. These witches are like you. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals, no matter who they destroy in the process. This was their fate from the moment their mother sent them from the dead woods. The odd sisters will rip their souls asunder, all in the name of their dearest Circe. They will think they are helping, yet they will do nothing but destroy. And you will do the same if you choose to stay here and not take your place where you belong. Then I will demand their mother take them back and set the course right, one ruler of the dead to another. We'll avoid all the madness and destruction. Problem solved. Jeez, am I the only critical thinker here? If you've read the book of fairy tales, then you know their mother has passed beyond the veil, and there is no reasoning with her. The odd sisters have only just learned of their connection to the dead woods because you brought it to their attention when they appeared in the underworld. When they learn their entire story, they will make the sky red with blood, and the stone angels will weep. This is their fate. Do not interfere. Every story in the book of fairy tales is threaded together like a spider's web. Cut one string, and you will destroy more than one life. These sisters are the markers of fate in this land, but they will become the Furies. They are not to be meddled with. Not exactly the answer I was hoping for. The Fate's words gave Hades a terrible feeling of foreboding. What aren't you saying? He asked, an uncustomary chill moving throughout his body. We now see that you are too intricately woven into the book of fairy tales, and we cannot untangle you. We cannot cut that thread, and we fear for the future of your kingdom and for all of our fates. The only thing we can do now is help you. Oh, so now you want to help me? I thought there was no way of escaping my fate without destroying the cosmos. Do you need a moment to get your story straight, or are we going to stick with this narrative? Because honestly, I can't keep up. Hades was getting angry and impatient, and the last thing he wanted was for the odd sisters to walk in and find these hags in their house. It was one thing for him to be here. They owed him a favor. It was another having a know-it-all town hall meeting in their kitchen. There is one way, but it's dangerous. You will need to split your strings of fate. It will take witches even more powerful than us to achieve this, but it seems you have the means to make use of the very witches who may be able to help you. If they can find the spell they need in the books of their mothers, you will be able to reside here and in your realm. Isn't that your thing, cutting strings? Why can't you just do it? Asked Hades, feeling even more impatient. We cut strings, we do not split them. There's a big difference. Fine. So there'd be two of me, like a copy, running around looking, acting, and talking like me? Will he be funny and devilishly handsome? What am I saying? Of course he will. Not a copy. He will be you, and you will be him, one and the same. And will he and I agree to this? He will, and you will both get what you want. Together, along with the Titans, you will be able to defeat your brother. The other Hades will take over Olympus, and you will be free to stay here if you wish. What makes you think I want to stay here once I win? But the Fates disappeared. Their only answer was their mocking laughter, which still lingered in the odd sisters' kitchen after they left. Leave it to these know-it-alls to tell him what he wanted. But he did think their plan was delicious, and he did love to live deliciously. Two of him was better than one, he thought, and he decided that that was the favor he was going to ask of the odd sisters. He would ask them to split his fate string. The Fates had said they would need the right spell, but that shouldn't be a problem. Nothing would stand in their way, except Circe. He knew in his cold black heart that Circe was the only person who might interfere with his plans. She had warned him she wouldn't allow him to bring the odd sisters into any of his schemes. He had to do something about Circe.